Welcome aboard the Red Friday Podcast, coming at you live and loud from Armed Forces Brewing Company, where every Friday at 6 p.m. we paint the airwaves red in honor of our deployed heroes. It's not just a color, it's a commitment. Red Friday stands as a bold reminder to remember everyone deployed. Here, every Friday, we don our red with pride and raise our glasses high to those who serve. Join your dynamic hosts, Alan and MP, as they weave through the rich tapestry of military tales, engage with captivating guests in the Red Sea, and, of course, delve into the world of exceptional brews crafted right here at Armed Forces Brewing Company. Each episode is a blend of bravery and beers, where we explore the stories behind the brews, the craft of the pour, and the artistry that infuses every pint with a taste of freedom. So whether you're a beer lover, a supporter of our armed forces, or someone who loves a good story with a pint in hand, the Red Friday Podcast is your front row seat to inspiration, celebration, and our nation's unwavering resolve. Gear up, pour out, and tune in to the Red Friday Podcast. Wear your red, savor the brews, and join us in a salute to the courage that inspires us all.
We are here. It's the Red Friday Podcast. AI Allen. And
you're back.
The gun-toting MP.
Mostly peaceful marketing.
Yeah, mostly peaceful marketing. Boy. Anyway, welcome to the Red Friday Podcast, everybody. Comments are open. We are live streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter.
That's right. We got some special. We got a very special guest on today. And then we also brought back a fan favorite from last week. But yeah, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of news to talk about. You want to give them some insight on our guest today?
Yeah. So, veterans watching and other folks watching, I grew up in Nebraska, of all places, the heartland, cornfields and rivers, lakes, and, we're farmers out there. Even if we live in the city like Lincoln or Omaha, you still kind of have that farm thing going on. And you remember Red Dawn, that movie, Red Dawn?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was 1984 or something like that. And then they redid it.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're into zombie movies and all that good kind of stuff. And we got this huge political divide going on in the country and violence going on in our cities, especially in 2020, if you remember the riots and burning and looting. And, there's a huge survival movement out there, huge. And it's just, not about survival. You got, we're 2A supporters.
Mm-hmm.
We all own our firearms. It's a great constitutional right that we have. But, growing up in Nebraska, we learn how to fish and live off the land and all, deer hunting and there's deer hunting practically all over the country, big time here on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a great guest, Chris Heaven, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. So what is Survival Dispatch? Well, it's a group of some really cool dudes, most of them veterans that get together and they talk about a number of topics, survival techniques, survival gear, guns, fishing, all sorts of topics, politics, everything. And they have quite the platform out there at Survival Dispatch with hundreds of thousands to millions of views on their content, on their podcasts. So we'll get more skinny on that when we bring Chris in.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ken, D's Nuss is here with us.
Yeah, he might be a regular just because he's
so funny. Yeah.
We just like having him around.
His name is Ken Nuss, and we call him D's Nuss.
And I'm pretty sure you can figure out why.
Anyway, When the zombie apocalypse comes, or there starts to be, another civil war in our country, I am directly heading. I'm packing up the Jeep MP, and you and I are going to be rolling through. What car do you drive again?
I got a Durango.
You got a Durango. I mean, like the Mac Daddy souped up Durango.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We'll just put some blades on around the perimeter and hightail it down to Chris Heaven's place.
Yeah,
and link up with Survival Dispatch.
I think what we're going to do is just fill up a bunch of big giant water cannons filled with preamble, because most of the zombies are probably going to be, a lot of the crazies that are out in our society right now. Just hose them down with some freaking preamble. They might be like, "Ooh, this freedom tastes good," and they come back to human. That's kind of how I see it happening. So we'll see. We'll see if that's a viable option in a zombie apocalypse, is to soak them with some of our freedom beer and bring them back to life.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's bring them on. Let's bring them in the studio, because this is going to be a great discussion, without a doubt. We're gonna let Chris tell us more about Survival Dispatch, his story, and how he created Survival Dispatch and exactly what they do. Let's bring him in.
Cool. I'm gonna bring in Chris, and I'll bring in.
There he is.
We got Chris, and we got Ken Nuss.
And the myths,
what's up, gents?
The legends.
What's up?
What's up, boys?
Chris Heaven, how are you?
I'm doing good, but my feelings are a little hurt. I didn't get the memo that I had to wear a red shirt today.
That's all right.
I feel like Sesame Street. Which one doesn't belong?
That would be Ken.
That's right. I had my Trump shirt on last week, and it wasn't red.
Ken, you're in New Jersey.
I'm in New Jersey, and you know what? It's funny. I'm looking outside. I grew up here in Sussex County. It's a blue state, but I grew up fishing. I grew up in the woods. I rode my bike for 15 miles. We didn't have cell phones. It was the country. And I'm still in the same town that I grew up in. But, I was just thinking, I bought my first gun a year and a half ago. All this time, I never had an urge to have it. Now it's a freaking necessity, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that don't have guns, but I'm sure we'll get into the needs for it. But everything has changed now. It's just it has changed drastically in the past few years.
Well, we think you're going to save New Jersey, so
you are. Listen, I'm on a mission. First thing is you get your beer here, and so we're going to get an update on that in a little bit. And then we're saving New Jersey. We are. We're gonna get.
Have you fired your gun? Have you fired your gun yet, Ken? I'm interested in that. You go to the range.
Have you fired it?
What'd you say?
Have you taken it to the range?
Have you taken your gun to the range?
I can't tell you. I'm an expert now. I'll leave it at that.
Good. All right. He's the CEO of Survival Dispatch. Chris Heaven in the house. Chris, you're in Florida.
We spend most of our time here in Central Florida, but we have a home in the Blue Ridge Mountains as well.
Beautiful area of North. And are you in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge, or are you
just south of the Tennessee River in Georgia? Yep.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, Chris, tell us about. Let's start from the beginning. Are you a veteran? I'm not a veteran. Are you a veteran? Did you serve?
No, I did some time in law enforcement, short period of time. Back in Dallas, Fort Worth, didn't like being shot at, so went back to the construction industry. It's a long time ago, late 80s. But no, I actually, if I have one regret in life, is not having an opportunity to serve. And I actually, believe it or not, looked into it when I was 43, 44, but I was just past the age of 42 that they would accept at that particular point in time. So that's my one regret.
Gotcha. So tell us the story of Survival Dispatch. Like, when did you get it started? How did you get it started? Why did you get it started?
All right. So before I dive into that, Ken, would like to welcome you to the Gun Owners Club. We've got as you guys probably know, there are a ton of new gun owners since 2020 and a lot of new different demographics as well. A ton of women, minorities, people who normally wouldn't buy guns. And, you know, for years I used to go to the NRA meetings as a VIP because the CEO of the Washington Times was a friend of mine, and they would donate in the range of $5 million a year. I'm not a big fan of the NRA, just to make that clear. And I got really sick and tired of hearing Wayne Lapierre saying that the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. Well, I come from a high-tech background, Sun Microsystems and Oracle, and you guys all know this. Big tech, big media, Big Brother nuked the First Amendment 20 years ago, and it's only been getting progressively worse. However, as a gun owner, Ken, you now become part of, pardon me, the firewall between globalism and freedom. You know, and we all know that if America goes down, there's nobody coming to our rescue. But as long as we're an armed society, then we are that firewall, because if we go down, the globalists will wipe this country out, just like they're doing around the world, which is why they're flooding our border with invaders. I don't call them migrants. They're not migrants. They're invaders. So I'll get off that soapbox and I'll tell you the Survival Dispatch story. So Survival Dispatch,
brother, it's an
we'll go back to that soapbox.
We'll go back to that. Yeah.
I'm all in favor of that. So the Cliff Notes version of Survival Dispatch, it was started by a friend of mine, and he ended up hitting it big time during COVID in the firearms industry. So he went from 0 to $82 million in 3 years and 3 quarters. And unfortunately, during that time, there were some issues with patents over triggers. And both parties, himself and the other party, probably colored outside of the lines. But at the end of the day, it destroyed him and the company reputationally and financially. So they owed me a bunch of money, and I said, tell you what, give me the assets to Survival Dispatch. We'll call it a day. So that's how I ended up becoming the CEO and the owner of Survival Dispatch. But we altered the company quite radically. So prior to me being involved, the focus was primitive survival. So, for example, there were guys on Survival Dispatch like Alan Kay, who won the 2nd season of Alone. And at the end of the day, business 101, you should play to your audience. And the fact of the matter is 83% of Americans live in cities or suburbs. Mm-hmm. So the survival prepping community want to learn, but not if it's a heavy lift. So nobody wants to go out there and rub 2 sticks together, just to be quite frank. That's a very, very small part of the segment of the survival community. So we discuss a lot of things related to urban survival. And at the end of the day, our job is to dispatch information so our fellow Americans and friends of Americans can survive in these very uncertain times. And as long as we do that, all the rest of it is just a byproduct, a result of what we do. So part of that was, I'm like the Forrest Gump of the high-tech industry. I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I got a super deep Rolodex. And that Rolodex keeps growing. Actually, the only person who has a Rolodex that I've met that compares to me is our good friend Ken here. But by virtue of that, friends of mine like Todd Callender are part of Survival Dispatch now. So Todd's the notorious federal level attorney who sued Lloyd Austin, the DOD, over the mRNA injections. There were 50 attorneys on it. He was the lead attorney, took it all the way to SCOTUS on behalf of 400 troops. He's the CEO of a global insurance company along the lines of Berkshire Hathaway. For shits and grins, he does things like he just bought 850 square miles in Chile and is now.
And that's where we're going. That's where we're going in your Durango.
If things
Chile, I'll drive it to Chile.
If things go to shit, that's absolutely where we're all going, because he's in the process of building an autonomous zone there, quite seriously, for Americans if things do go off the rails. So Todd ended up buying a platform called CloudHub, CLOUTHUB.com, and it was kind of in development, maybe beta level sort of thing. And he bought it as a side interest because he was sick and tired of our voices being squashed. And he's invested a lot of time and money. So now Todd and I work very closely on CloudHub together. We did a video, MP and Alan and I and a couple other people a couple weeks back. We put it up on YouTube where we get a ton of suppression. And the same video, we threw it over on CloudHub, and I don't know, 50, 60,000 views in the first hour or something like that. The one we did with Rob O'Neill was 250,000 views in the first 24 hours, those sort of things. So all of us on our side of the equation are heavily suppressed, and CloudHub is the only platform out there. You can't post pornography and you can't post anything that's illegal, but other than that, it's anything goes. And, I'll give Elon Musk some credit for restoring free speech, but at the end of the day, we've seen conservative figures have their followers drop by hundreds of thousands overnight. Still, their views are falling off a cliff. And, I made a comment. Somebody made this suggestion that was in favor of Joe Biden doing one thing or another about a month ago. And I said, that's a moronic idea. And I have a screenshot on my phone that popped up and it said, you shouldn't use that word. You might hurt somebody's feelings. So X is not, the 100% free speech platform that CloudHub is. And every single day we're in meetings with different people, whether it's Mike Lindell or other people at his level that are looking for a platform where they can speak up without having their voice squashed. So that's the Cliff Notes version.
And that is Clout. It's Clout Hub, not Cloud Hub, folks. Not
Correct.
CLOUD. It's CLOUT. OUT Hub. Clout.
So Todd, just to be clear, a guy named Jeff Brain started the platform. When he died, Todd ended up buying it. It's not the best name, but the problem is it's got some notoriety now, and it would be a difficult rebrand. We've discussed it. We may do it at some point in time, but for the time being, we're scrambling to get SOPs in place just to deal with the constant deluge of people. Sarah Westall is a good example. She's been shut down on every form of social media, used to get a gazillion views, and we're pulling her into the Cloud Hub world. Drew Burquist, Mammoth Nation. I was in his studio last week, and he's at the point where he's ready just to say, screw it. I'm not doing this anymore because of the suppression. He looked at Cloud Hub when Jeff Brain had it, and it was beta quality. He's coming back to look at it, though, now that we've made improvements there. So anyway.
Real quick, make a mental note that I need to talk to you about Sarah, about putting her and someone else in touch. And maybe we'll have them expose what has to be exposed on Cloud Hub. so make a note of that.
So I've made a note because, I don't have Alzheimer's, but I got some timers. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget. So I just wrote that down. So
I don't have a notepad. So yes. I want to give Chris a shout out real quick. We actually met through Kyle Reyes. And it was and all of us came together in Mar-a-Lago. So
tell our audience, who's Kyle Reyes? So
Kyle is the owner of Law Enforcement Today, Blue Lives Matter. And he's been canceled by the left every other day. He's been recently kicked off LinkedIn twice because every time he gets kicked off, he's texting me, hey, is my profile up? Can you see it? I think it's gone. Sure enough, it's gone. We made such a big stink out of it, I would say maybe 3 weeks ago, that he was back on in 4 or 5 days. Maybe, about that. But anyway, when I started working with everybody over at Border 911, we had a very daunting task to fundraise for Border 911, Tom and the crew. And let's just say we had about 5 weeks to market and sell out the event on April 4th. And Kyle, I reached out to Kyle and I said, I need help. And he had a little team, and Chris was part of his little team that came in and worked with us on a daily basis to try and sell those tickets out. And, I remember Jason, if you guys remember, that night was crazy. I had no idea if that was a good night or a bad night for attendance, but we plowed through it. It was I don't remember sitting down for more than 5 minutes. But at the end of the day, I thought that was how all the events were at Mar-a-Lago. Same with Jason Jones. He didn't know. He called me 3 days later, and he's like, Ken, do you know that was the 3rd largest event ever in Mar-a-Lago? So I bring that up because it all goes back to your network and who you can work with. And, we have been fortunate enough, I think all of us, to have been put in touch with one another in some amazing way at the right time. Because it's the teamwork that gets us to where we are, and none of us are doing it with our hands out. You know what I'm saying? I think it's important to note that, Chris, I thank you for all your help. You stepped up and helped me with Chris's video. That's another thing with General Flynn. But yeah, no, Chris has been a true asset. And again, we build our Rolodexes together. We're not here to work against one another, but to work with each other. And I think MP, it's kind of crazy because all this happened at the same time. I don't know if you ever told that story that you told, how you ran into Alan about the border wall.
Oh yeah. So it goes much way back, like further than that, for when, how I ended up joining the company, and I was in like the worst pain of my life when I hurt it goes like the work that's happening from a higher power that's happening to get to where we are today is something that I can't describe. But I'll say that's a longer story for another day. But the way we got in touch was we were looking to do something good. We had some beer that we wanted to build a border wall with. And we're like, what should we do? We want to do something to market our company. We're looking to do something. And we're like, kicking around ideas. And one day we were like, let's build a border wall out of the beer pallets that we have. So I come back from lunch with this idea. I tell Alan, and I swear to you, he's like, yeah, that could work. Good idea. I swear, Alan, how was it? 5 minutes? Was it 5 seconds? Like, it was right away. Ken calls you. It's like, hey, I have this idea. Like
3 to 5.
Then Ken called Alan.
Yeah, so I called and I was like, listen, I'm working on this event with Border 911, trying to see how we can, use you guys, work with you to make it a success. And like the conversation, like within that time frame was let's build the wall. Then it was where we're going to do it before. Remember, we wanted to build the border wall before Mar-a-Lago, and Mar-a-Lago was April 4th. I think it was like 3 weeks, and there was like no physical way we could have done that. And then we said, let's start the border wall in Mar-a-Lago. So, Chris, when we met you, that border wall was the first border wall that we built out of beer, and now we have what do you want to call it? Now we have something that we're doing in border states to show that the average company, the beer company, knows we need a border wall. Why don't other organizations realize that? They're worried about putting rainbow flags up in Tractor Supply, like to make everybody feel inclusive there. I'm not going to go to Tractor Supply. I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry.
All right.
So I noticed that when, when you all did the beer wall, that the demographics at the southern border changed to a whole bunch of Germans and Polacks coming to the country.
It's good beer. It's good beer. That's why.
Brilliant strategy.
Yeah. So we're doing more visiting to several different sectors of the southern border and perhaps the northern border maybe once or twice. But I want to get back to Survival Dispatch, because what a great platform you have, Chris, and a great podcast you have, great content that you have. Tell us, you have a wider range of topics that you guys discuss at Survival Dispatch, but you've also got, I don't know if they're sponsors or not, like gun companies are listening to your podcast, gun enthusiasts, fishing enthusiasts, hunting enthusiasts. Give us a little more detail on the content over there at Survival Dispatch.
So we produce 12 long-form videos and 30 short-form videos per week. Those long-form videos are all different shows. So Survival Dispatch News is every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The Righteous Savages is every Tuesday, Thursday. On 3 with Jason Sawyer's every Saturday, Sunday. Fuel the Fires with JJ Morris is every Tuesday. Monday's Bill Stoker-Matic. Thursday is Survival Dispatch Academy, which these are the learning videos. Essentially, our formula is pretty simple. I got a frog in my throat here that's killing me.
That's right.
So
Let it out.
We, again, the majority of Americans live in cities. So urban survival is what's top of mind for people. The fact that we're a first world country with a third world power grid is top of mind for people. If we throw anything out there that's related to EMPs, CMEs, grid down, it explodes. So we're actually the only people who've ever tested EMP shields outside of the military. So if you were to believe what nuclear powered countries tell you, 90,000 volts is the limit of a nuclear generated EMP. In reality, it's 200,000 volts. So we built a 400,000 volt Marks generator. So we took a 20,000 volt transformer, hooked it up to 20 capacitors, and they simultaneously discharge an ESD, electrostatic discharge, which is just like an electromagnetic pulse generated by a nuclear weapon. We put it 6 inches beside sensitive electronic equipment, LED controllers, furnace controller, all that stuff. And we had an EMP shield in our test bed 8 feet away, and it protected every single device on that deal. We took the EMP shield off. It smoked everything, then coupled onto the wiring in the wall, went up a floor and over to the other side of the building and smoked a fridge. So then we built an 800,000 volt Marks generator, and Steve Yost, who's our master electrician, 25 feet away from the transformer, hooked up to 40 capacitors with a fiberglass rod standing on a tire, flicked it and electrocuted himself at that far away. I mean, we're talking super high voltage stuff. So we decided we'd build a Tesla power coil instead. So we're in the process of putting together a 1.2 million volt Tesla power coil where we will test the EMP shield devices to the max. September 1st, 1859 Carrington event. So it's estimated that we were hit with somewhere around like 900,000 volts. It set all the telegraph wires on fire. It set telegraph operators on fire. It melted telegraphs. And so we want to show that the EMP shields can go beyond even something like that. So CME, coronal mass ejection, plasma coming out of the sun. Okay. At the end of the day, regardless of all the techno, babble, if you ask what concerns people the most, it's going an extended period of time without power. And I live in Hurricane Central, so we're used to not having power. So there's all kinds of things people can do. You can put an EMP shield on your home and protect it. But if the grid goes down, now you have no power supply, right? So I don't know if all y'all are aware of this, but when you buy anything that's solar powered for your home, there's a 30% federal tax credit. So if you were to buy a power station that's expandable, let's say you spent $1,500 and you bought a small solar panel to go with it and you put them on the same ticket, you can claim 30% of that back on your taxes. And then maybe next year you got a little bit more money and you buy a couple more batteries. They're typically around $1,000 a piece. Buy another small solar panel, you get another 30% back. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So we spend a lot of time discussing grid down and offering people insight on that. But I'll give you our formula. It's nothing too complex. You guys, Alan, you've got sales experience. Ken, you have sales experience. MP, we're going to come back to you because I really want to know how you made it all the way from the 70s to now with Serpico, and you haven't aged a day, but that's another topic we got to come back to. But in sales, the hardest thing to do is what's called the paradigm shift. So Alan, if I walked into your office 2:00 on a Friday afternoon and said, Alan, I want to sell you this widget. It's the best thing since sliced bread. You're probably going to go, you know what? I've got to make sure that I've got payroll in the bank for all of my employees. I want to go home and see my family and kids, so on and so forth. It's the hardest sale to make. It's called the paradigm shift, where you're switching somebody's thinking, right? So if you watch a lot of stuff on long form videos, YouTube, Rumble, Cloud Hub, whatever, you'll see this pattern of one, exploding, the next one, not so much, one exploding. And it's hard to guess what's top of mind for people unless you do what we do. We take something that's top of the news cycle. We know it's therefore top of mind. Then we bring in subject matter experts. Rob O'Neill would be an example. And we say, okay, here's this thing that's top of the news cycle, top of mind for you. Here's a subject matter expert or group of subject matter experts. And then we recommend the things that our followers can actually do to make a change. We did it with you guys when we were discussing election integrity, right? So there's all these groups of, the America Project, true the vote, so on and so forth, where people can actually do actionable stuff. We take that advice, we put it into a poll, we send it out to our email list, which is 2 million people. We throw it up on maybe a YouTube survey and we say, hey, our subject matter experts recently made these 5 recommendations. What would you like to see more content on? There's always 2 that finish at the top, occasionally 3. Well, it depends on what the recommendations are for that week. But what we do is we then take that information and we give it to our creators and we say, here, if you want to know what the audience is going to respond to, Business 101, they told you what they're going to respond to, and then they'll do a video on these things. It could be using e-bikes for a bug out, for example. When we first started positioning e-bikes as a bug out tool, people were like, oh, that's bullshit. But you know what? 17% of Americans have exercised since 1980. That number never, ever, ever changes. So there's a place for e-bikes, one for people who maybe aren't physically fit. And the other option is if you put somebody who is fit on them, it's like a force multiplier. I can cover 140 plus miles on my e-bike at 30 plus miles an hour and barely break a sweat. So
never thought of it that way.
Say again, Ken?
I said I never thought of, I would never have bought one. But now that you just put that thought in my mind, you know, I guess I got to listen to you more.
So put it this way. So when we first started promoting e-bikes as a viable tool, especially for get home purposes, right? You hear people in the survival community are always discussing bugging out. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of people have nowhere to bug out to, number one. Number two, they live in a city. So, you know, when we have hurricanes, if there's a mandatory evacuation, good luck getting anywhere on I-75 or I-95 as a parking, right?
Yeah.
So when we first started recommending e-bikes as a great way to get home, because that's more realistic. The average American works 15 miles from their home, and you can walk 15 miles in a day if you're half in decent shape, but an e-bike is a way to get there even faster. So then the pundits came out of the woodwork and said, yeah, but EMP, you know, we have an EMP and that e-bike is toast. Well, no, not necessarily, because if you have an EMP shield device, anything that's plugged in is protected. And while we may be the only ones who've ever tested and shown something like a Marks generator and 400,000 volts, there are videos out there after the fact where somebody's been hit by lightning, blew the EMP shield off the wall, but did 0 damage inside. Most of the time with surge protectors, the problem is that the electricity is so powerful. So a lightning strike, right? 3, 4, 5,000 amps, 1,000,000 volts. So you have this surge protector, it just jumps the gap. It's not protecting you from shit. It's not going to do a dang thing for that matter. The EMP shield devices are not surge protectors. So the material that's inside, metal oxide varistor, it's called, has infinite resistance until it senses electricity, and then it has infinite attraction, which is how we could hit a test bed this far away from sensitive electronics and protect it with that guy 8 feet away because it draws the electricity to it. It's not a surge protector, totally different deal. So if you have an EMP shield on your home or your vehicle and you had your e-bike plugged into your vehicle and an EMP happens, your e-bike is just fine. So anyway.
I think we need a class on that. That's interesting.
So, yeah, I have a question. So we're in Norfolk, right? We're the biggest naval station in the country. Mm-hmm. If we were to be attacked by, let's say, a foreign power or even from within our country, right? Our landmass is huge. Our assets are separated and all across the country strategically. What kind of attack would have to happen EMP-wise or conventional, you know, just a combination to shut everything down where we wouldn't be able to have a response? Like, would they be all nuclear? Would they be all ICBMs coming in with EMP capability on it? Like, would they shut down the East Coast first, West Coast? Because obviously we know where everything is. Does it make sense? Like, it would have to be like a whole entire, like, it would have to be a really coordinated attack from a foreign power or, you know, proxy terrorist group or something like that.
Unfortunately,
everything.
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is no. Would not take a high level of sophistication. So we have three grids. There's an Eastern grid, Western grid, Texas grid. Okay. Occasionally they're attached, but for the most part, they're autonomous. So a couple summers ago, there were rolling brownouts in California. Texas connected their grid to the West grid. sent some power towards California. We actually got chastised for this years ago, where we explain what I'm fixing to explain right now. Each one of those grids has 3 power substations that are Achilles heels, choke points. If you knock out 9 substations, that's it, 9 in the entire country, you knock out all 3 grids. And the only people who would have power would basically be the people who live right beside the power generation company, because everything else, the whole grid is gone. A year ago, it was 18 months lead time to get transformers. We have none in stock. We don't make them. They come from Germany, South Korea, places like that. As of today, it's a minimum 36 months to get transformers. Okay. So if you knock out 9 substations, you take out the entire country, we're in a world of hurt. We would be put back in time a couple hundred years, which is why people are so concerned over this. Because if you take the power out, you just took out communications, except for people who have redundant power systems. So that's a combination of, say, diesel, propane generators, solar panels that have some production capacity. Like even in Florida here, if somebody goes out and buys a couple small portable solar panels, they're going to quickly realize that the output is not what they think it is, and that it takes a really long time to charge anything. And, so where Ken is, for example, they don't have hurricane force winds. So when solar panels are mounted on farms, they have servo motors so they can follow the declination of the sun and get the optimum charging capability. We're not allowed to do that in Florida because of wind loads. You can have maximum 10 degrees to solar panels that are, say, put on flat commercial roofing systems. So at the end of the day, if you take out all the grids, somebody doesn't have batteries to store electricity, doesn't have any way to generate electricity, again, we're going to go back in time about 200 years. So I'll go one step further, since you were an Intel guy, MP. Today we aired an episode of Survival Dispatch News on social credit scores coming to America. And you don't just leave China to go to our southern border and walk into America. They don't let their citizens have that level of freedom, right? So depending on whose numbers you want to believe, and we do have some people on the inside in various organizations that feed us a lot of really good intel, but probably the most believable intel that I've seen is it between Q4 and Q1, somewhere in the range of 30,000 Chinese spec ops trained soldiers crossed our southern border. Okay. I've seen estimates as high as maybe there's 300,000 of them in the country. Here's the connections. So pull up the maps that show you where the Chinese have been buying farmland. Okay. Have a close look at where the critical power substations are relative to that land that they bought. So MP, you would know, spec ops guys, these aren't operators like Rob O'Neill. These are intellectual warriors, and they've all set up on this Chinese farmland right beside our critical infrastructure so that they can play a role in nuking our infrastructure. We know from a logical perspective that they have access to everything. So for example, at February 22nd, when AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile went down, there were all these speculations, right? So people were saying, oh, it was solar flares. Well, you know what? There were 3 solar flares that hit the Mediterranean at 3 a.m. in the morning Eastern time that had nothing to do with what happened here. And of course, a couple weeks later, AT&T came out and said it was a software glitch. Really? So how do you explain when you have a tower that has all 3 carriers on one cell phone tower and all 3 of them went down? It had nothing to do with the individual infrastructure from each of them. Not even an hour after that happened from CSIS, so one of our computer security divisions, we had somebody on the inside reached out to us and said, this is 100% a Chinese cyber attack. And it takes very little effort. They did it in Massachusetts this week. So they took out 911 in Boston first, then they took out the rest of the state. And these are all trial runs towards something bigger, because they're testing what their capabilities will be. So, I mean, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole quickly here, and then we can go on whatever topic you want. But we were given intel maybe a year ago or so that said that there were plans across the country for terrorist cells to attack schools in counties that had small populations, so population under 200,000. So, for example, we know for a fact that there are some Somali terrorists south of Boise, Idaho, They have a George Soros-backed DA in that area. They have George Soros-backed judges. There are constant reports of munitions going off. But anytime they go to do a wellness check, they're like, you can't come in, and the authorities can't get a warrant to go in there. But what we know is that they have somewhere around 12 cells, and they plan on attacking 12 schools simultaneously in a county with less than 200,000 people. There's only enough law enforcement to respond to one of those incidents, and they have the plans to do this across the country simultaneously. When you war game that out after 3 days, so that 12 cells attack 12 schools today, and law enforcement responds to one. 11 of those cells attack 11 schools the next day in another small county. And the next day after that, 10 of them attack 10 more schools in a small county. Everything today, and you guys know this, our supply chain is all based on JIT, just in time. Grocery stores have a maximum 3 days worth of food on the shelves. If you take out things like our communications networks, you cause mass chaos by the types of attacks that I just mentioned. People will kill each other for a TV on Black Friday. What do you think they're going to do when they have no food? And I've been saying for years, we're never more than 3 missed meals away from complete anarchy. Okay. So all of this stuff is intertwined and related. The ability to hack into all of our critical infrastructure, the physical proximity to infrastructure. Just south of y'all, for example, 2 years ago, this coming December, there was an attack on a substation in Murray County, North Carolina. Okay. So I'm assuming most of your viewers are probably gun people, right? So when you see those buckets in the transformers in the substations, they're full of mineral oil, which keeps the transformers cool. It's an 1/8 of an inch soft metal. You don't even need armor piercing rounds. You could take just regular 9mm and shoot them full of holes like they did in Murray County, North Carolina. The mineral oil drains out, poof, gone. That substation is off.
That's what I was going to bring up. That was the first, that was the beginning of all the attacks on our infrastructure, was because they happened about 2 weeks apart, right? There was that one in Murray County, then there was another one and another one. And then they stopped when they realized they can just shoot them out. They can shoot them out with 9.22s, 9mm, 5.56 even.
Go have a look. When you drive by substations, have a look at them. There's no security. Even if there are cameras in the area, it takes nothing to perforate those transformers. And again, which are, 36 months out, a lot of which, by the way, larger substations, which of course take out a larger area. And by the way, Murray County, North Carolina, still has not had those transformers replaced. What they did is they connected that piece of the grid to another piece, which is now operating beyond what its capacity should be. Let me give you another quick example of how easy it is to knock our power out. The most robust transmission lines we have in the country handle 700,000 volts, 700 kV. Most of them are 200,000 volts. If you break into the SCADA systems that run all of this and you direct 700,000 plus volts down a line that's good for 200,000, you smoke everything instantly. So, again, we're a first world country with a third world power grid. The grid is our glass jaw, for lack of a better term. But here's the thing. If you look at those big substations, they're all located next to train tracks. Why are they located next to train tracks? Because when the transformers are shipped into the country, they pick them up with a crane off the boat, they put it on a rail car, they drive it to where it needs to go with the train, and then they pick it up with a crane and set it up. They're too big to haul down the interstate. So we're in a super precarious spot. And I've been saying since the late 80s, long before anybody coined the term uniparty, I've been saying the Republicans and Democrats are two different sides of the same coin. For 30 years now, almost on an annual basis, one party or the other has introduced a bill in the House to protect our grid from EMPs, CMEs, and this sort of stuff. And the latest one was a couple years ago. It would have been $5 billion. We haven't sent $200 billion to Ukraine. We've sent $1 trillion to Ukraine when you flesh it all out. But we can't spend $5 billion to protect our grid. We couldn't even spend that much money to build the dang wall because of all the politics and bullshit that's involved in it. But at the end of the day, it's a massive weakness. And MP, what happened is they went from Murray County, North Carolina to Washington State and Oregon and did the exact same things there. Like you said, a couple weeks later, it's trivial. It's disgusting how easy it is to take down our infrastructure. So that's why it's the number one concern. Anytime we put something out that discusses this with survival dispatch, it absolutely explodes. We could do it 5 days a week and it would explode. And I will say this much. We work with a company called EMP Pro that is backed by Kevin Harrington. Kevin Harrington's the OG from Shark Tank. I'm on Kevin Harrington's A team on his TV show, Boom America. And he backs this company out of Denver called Switch It Up Inc. Switch It Up Inc. has this other company called EMP Pro. They have a national roster of licensed electricians who will install EMP Pros in your vehicle, your home, your office, whatever the case may be. And I'll give people a warning here. So all of us in the Gulf states, we're in the midst of an insurance catastrophe because of unethical contractors. So your insurance premiums, at least in the state of Florida, are dictated by your zip code, okay? So we get hit with a storm. This is what happened in the past. And the door knockers would show up and say, would you like me to inspect your roofing system? And you've got no leaks. You say, no, we're good. And they'll say, you should probably let me do it because your premium's going up because all your neighbors were getting them free roofs. And you might as well get one at the same time. So they scam the shit out of insurance companies. There's no love lost between me and insurance companies. But what that resulted in is a bunch of insurance companies leaving the Gulf states, and also laws like we have in Florida now. When your roofing system hits 10 years old, doesn't matter if it's shingles, doesn't matter if it's vitrified clay tiles, metal roof, whatever, the insurance companies have a right to reduce your coverage to 25% of its original coverage value. So then what happens if you have a mortgage, the bank says you need to get full insurance. So now you're forced into putting a new roofing system on your home or paying for insurance through the bank. And now people who are paying, let's say $1,200 a year for insurance, $5,000 a year, $6,000 a year, people are losing their homes over this. Okay. So at the end of the day, all of this stuff that's related to whether it's hurricanes, terrorism, domestic terrorism, logical attacks over the network, all comes back to the fact that we're sitting on this power grid that isn't worth shit. That's it.
Got it. Let me chime in here. You got to add it up, folks. It's right in front of your face. Let's just walk through it real quick in the simplest of terms. We've got, Chris, you threw that out there, 27,000, 30,000 plus Chinese nationals coming through the southern border. Hello?
41.
Okay. We have the FBI and NYPD busting Chinese police stations that were set up in New York City. Go Google this stuff, you guys. This is information out there. This is real stuff that are policing Chinese. These police stations were policing Chinese nationals or people of Chinese nationality in New York City and wherever else. You've got farmland being bought by Chinese companies. And I remember I saw a recent Dr. Phil video. He was showing President Trump where all this farmland had been bought up around military installations and power grids and I mean, substations, whatever. This stuff is happening, folks. We had a Chinese satellite balloon fly over, almost the entire country. It's come down from up north and then flying all the way out to South Carolina where they finally shot it down. 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, equals 4, folks. So
yeah, and you have our government not doing a damn thing about that. Yet they're going after parents for going to school board meetings and fighting against this woke crap in the schools. You have the J6ers being I don't even know, how to even describe what's going on with them. It's a mess. And then you add in all the illegals, the plain old illegals that are coming in and taking up our services.
All of this is predicated on the Chinese 100-year plan that started in 1949 to engage us in asymmetrical warfare. So all the things you just mentioned, Ken, are the divide and conquer strategy. Yeah. So they're letting us destroy ourselves and laughing about it all. I mean, the Chinese involvement is so bad. I mean, MP, I'm sure, is aware of this. So the Chinese ship all the precursors to fentanyl to the cartels and Hezbollah in Mexico, because Hezbollah and the cartels are joined at the hip because it's a great way to raise money to pay for your terrorist operations. And then they mix it together and bring it across the border. There's two types of fentanyl, that are going on here. There's the simple way that's made with those precursors, which makes it really hard to have an accurate dose, which is why people end up ODing on it. But you now have Chinese labs producing counterfeit tablets that have inscriptions on them that if you search on it, it's like, oh, this is a Xanax. And it's not Xanax. It's friggin' fentanyl, right? So all of these things stitched together are to try and destroy us from within. We had a recent discussion, on the effectiveness of walls, right? So you get all these, like, what was her name? Jen Psaki or whatever, just a complete and utter establishment shill and moron, right?
Circle back.
Arguing how walls are not effective. And of course, you could give countless anecdotal examples of the Democrats putting fences and walls up around places they want to protect. But here's the thing. Armed walls work. All you have to do is look at East and West Berlin, and you had a kill zone so that when they didn't even get to the wall on the East Berlin side before they were shot and killed, right? Okay. So let's say we build this wall, we get Trump back in office, we build the wall between us and Mexico. You now have to man that wall. And here's the worst part. So not only do we have bad guys coming at us from Mexico, we have a country flooded behind our backs of bad guys. And you have very sophisticated cartel members that they're now your neighbor, and they drive the BMWs and the Mercedes and the Audis, and their kids go to the same school as you. And it looks like they're just like another American family. They end up doing things like going to Border Patrol agents who get paid a fraction of what they should be paid. Plus they're understaffed. We only have 15,000 border agents for all of our borders. 15,000. There's 35,000 cops in the NYPD, and they're supposed to be at 50,000 to be fully staffed. But we've got 15,000, and that's it, right? So the only way you're going to make this work is build the wall, man the wall with the military, and CBP needs to go to all the points of entry and run those points of entry. But again, you're going to be fighting a battle behind you and in front of you because of all this shit that's happened. It's not a good deal.
You know what, Chris? When we were down, right, guys, that's exactly what they said when we were down at the border in Arizona. They said they showed us the wall, right? We were at the actual border wall. They showed us the only border wall that was left behind that wasn't sold. The only reason it was left behind is because it was filled with cement. And then they showed us the electrical, like the substations that were like in place, but there was nothing there. Like they stopped. When they stopped, they weren't able to, put in the cameras. Like the wiring, the electricity is there for the cameras, but when they stopped it, they literally stopped everything. And like you're saying, it needs to be manned. And, I think they just need to start shooting. So,
well, I don't disagree with that, but just to complete the thought, and you guys know this from Jason Jones, Victor Avila, and all these guys, that the cartels will go to somebody, a border patrol agent, and say, "Here's a suitcase with $250,000 in it. Just turn a blind eye."
Yep.
And these are people who are asked to put their lives on the line and get paid peanuts. It's no different than Rob O'Neill, world-class operator, getting $60,000 a year to put his life on the line. Incomprehensible. It's not right.
And one of the most infuriating things is, we're talking about like Hezbollah in Mexico, the Chinese operating in Mexico, the cartels, is we have the capability to put an end to it overnight if we wanted to.
Yes.
There's, you know what I mean? And that's the most infuriating thing to me is we have the answers. We know what to do. There's just too many people getting paid off that we don't solve the problem.
Well, and you know what? We don't fight the way that I hate to say it. The other side does fight a lot harder than our side. I hate to say it. That's the biggest issue I have with the Republican Party right now. They don't have any balls. or the ones that do, there's not enough.
You're right, but
They don't have any. They don't have any nuts.
Nuts, no nuts.
Alan has frequently been using the word coalition, and we're seeing coalitions now leading up to this election unlike ever before on our side of the equation. But let me just drop some more bad news on you, okay? So 2 weeks after 10-7 in Gaza, we got some intel that said that Hezbollah had cells that wanted to attack open air venues in America, so football games, concerts, with aerosolized anthrax and or aerosolized fentanyl. There's 1,400 different analogs of fentanyl, by the way, and each one is progressively more powerful than the one prior. We only have signatures on 200 of them, okay? So number one, when the Chechen rebels seized the Moscow theater in 2003, unlike our law enforcement, in Russian law enforcement, the FSB, 50% of the people die. That's okay. That's acceptable. So they pumped remifentanil and carfentanil, which are 50 times more powerful than the base analog, through the HVAC system at that theater. They did not tell the first responders, who could have saved people by giving them Narcan, which, by the way, go to nextdistro.org, nextdistro.org, pick your state, fill out the form. They will send you free Narcan to carry in your EDC in case you ever get exposed to it. It's a really good deal. Anyway, so the FSB didn't tell the first responders this. So not only did the Chechen rebels die, but a whole bunch of innocent people died. And there was about 1,000 of them in that theater when it was taken over. So that tweaked the terrorists, number one. Number two, 2019, Hezbollah attacked the largest oil production facility in Saudi Arabia with multiple drones controlled by a piece of software developed in Hollywood called Drone Swarm, where one operator can control up to 5,000 drones simultaneously for light shows. But they modified it to use it for attack drones, okay? So we get this intel saying that they have eyes on open air venues. And you know what? It doesn't matter even if the aerosolized agent doesn't kill everybody, because it's the old Sun Tzu saying of kill one, terrorize 1,000. Can you imagine how many people would be trampled in a stadium where something like that's happening? So we put this video out there, and all the snipers came out of the woodwork. We're spreading fear porn. We don't know what we're talking about, blah, 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 blah. 2 days after we put the video out, somebody flew a DJI commercial drone into the Cleveland Browns stadium on a Thursday night football game. And this is barely 2 weeks after 10-7 in Gaza, and everybody stood there, the players, the officials, the fans looking at it. Now, if those had been paragliders with guys coming in with AK-47s, everybody would have been, holy shit, we just saw this happen in Gaza. We're going to get out of Dodge here. But nobody did anything, okay? So then that was on a Thursday. On Monday, SAM.gov, supplyandmanagement.gov, all federal contracts are awarded and managed through there, put up a huge RFP on the front page looking for small EMP-based weapons, so energy weapons essentially, that we could put on our drones to fire a concentrated beam of an EMP at an enemy drone, knock out its circuitry, and not have collateral damage, and hopefully recover some intel in the process, right? Because as you know, SAM 3s and SAM 6s cost between $4 and $11 million a piece. And you're not going to be taking down a bunch of drones over a football game with surface-to-air missiles and all the collateral damage that goes with it, right? So what I'm getting at here, and I'll bet money MP has something to say on this. Our military is always fighting the last war. And where we are right now, we're getting a shit ton of intel out of the Ukraine and Israel when it comes to drones. But my youngest son is serving at Fort Benning. He instructs 5-man squads on what to do when they encounter an FPV drone in the field. And you know what the protocol is for our military right now? Throw down a smoke bomb. Okay, does nothing because all these drones have infrared and thermal on them, so they can still see you. Okay, they see your heat signature with the thermal. And number two, now you're going to take your 5.56 duty rifle and shoot these guys out of the air. Anybody who's ever got bird hunting is going to tell you that ain't happening. Okay, and that doesn't include what happens with the ISRs and the predators that are 5,000 to 10,000 feet high that you can't see. You don't even know they're there, for crying out loud. So there is no effective defense against drones. So we've seen, for example, in the Ukraine, these Russian tanks, they all have a weak spot around the turret on their tanks. So they're kamikaze flying these cheap ass drones into them and killing everybody inside the tank. Now, some of them now are coming out with some additional shielding as a direct result of that. But I'm sure you've seen the videos where they're chasing individual soldiers, they blow up and kill the soldier there. So Admiral Robert Harward is a friend of mine. He's widely regarded by every SEAL alive as the greatest SEAL of all time. He was on with Rob O'Neill on Survival Dispatch News a couple weeks ago. Well, Bob, since he retired in 2012, sits on multiple boards of directors, CEO of a bunch of defense contractors in the UAE and places like that. Did y'all hear a couple months ago how an Israeli drone killed a truck full of UN observers? Did you catch that in the news though? Okay, do you know what that was? So there's no radio frequencies underground, right? It's the fourth dimension of modern day warfare. And as MP would know for sure, this is what happened in Baghdad and Sadr City. They took the battle underground, and anybody who's ever had an accidental discharge in their home will tell you, without ear protection and in close space, not a fun thing to go through. You can lose your hearing just like that in a tunnel. Those people who were in that vehicle were the victims of Israeli drones that were flying in the tunnels under Gaza, doing two things: mapping out the tunnels and killing Hamas terrorists. And they were 100% autonomous AI-driven drones because there's no tether back to the mothership. They came out, and it's the exact same thing as Skynet in the Terminator movies. They miscalculated and said, oh, those must be Hamas, and it killed all those innocent people. So unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where there is no really good defense against drones. And we have terrorists who have drones in America here that are going to be using them to do awful, terrible attacks. So we thought we would pick these up. These are the Skynet shotgun rounds, and we thought maybe these might work for FPVs, right? So five in this box, and it was $80 some odd with shipping. You can see the projectile split into 5 pieces, and then inside the case is a net. And the idea was that if you catch the blades on a drone, you can bring it down, which, by the way, some of our installations are now being protected with nets because the drones can't easily get through without getting messed up. So we were just getting ready to test these things to see how they did, and somebody else beat us to the punch. They didn't work. It's a novel idea, but it ain't going to stop this stuff. So anyway, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we have thousands of terror cells. Many of the cells have 10, 20, 100 people in them. We've got sophisticated things like drone attacks in place. We have aerosolized fentanyl. We have antibiotic resistant anthrax, thanks to the Russians giving it to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So MP, I know he knows this. They took anthrax, put it in a bowl, petri dish, and threw an antibiotic at it. 3 or 4% survived. They took the 3 or 4% that survived, put them in the next petri dish, let it grow, hit it with a different antibiotic. And they were very patient. They went through this process for many months, many years ago. And at the end, they ended up with anthrax spores that are 100% antibiotic resistant. So guess what happens? As soon as you show any symptoms of anthrax, whether it's antibiotic resistant or not, it's too late. You're dead. So again, just imagine.
You're saying my 6 rounds of anthrax vaccines doesn't work anymore?
Not for that particular formula.
I know.
So, Calendar, where are you?
Right.
Absolutely. Well, guys, before we wrap it up, Chris, one thing I loved about being on your show is you put questions to everybody as a group. That's a lot of fun. So I got a text. I'm getting texts from shareholders that are watching here and everything, but somebody just texted me something that's kind of interesting. We've talked a lot about worldly powers that would want to topple the U.S. or inter-country powers that would want to create these kind of climactic events. What about the UFO craze that's going on right now, with the Navy coming out with all this, and the New York Times coming out with their story and all that kind of stuff? What's your guys' take on that? Chris Heaven, let's start with you. What's your take on that? Is that a threat to the U.S. and the world, or is that just all Gibberish.
So I'm a product of the late 60s. So I'm in my mid 50s. And we don't have to go back very far, just to the 80s. And our solar system was the only solar system that we knew of in the 80s that had planets. All the other intel that we had was just on stars until we put more powerful things like Hubble telescope and whatnot out there. But even at that point in time, I remember people saying it's hubris to think that we're the only life in this ginormous universe. And I don't disagree with that. Now, as far as how sophisticated that is, I will say this. My wife and I have had a frequent conversation for years now, asking the rhetorical question, does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? So if you want to see what bullshit the WEF and Obama, because we know he's in his third term, are going to do next, go watch TV from 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago, and you'll see this stuff. Leading up to COVID, there was so much content on this. So why do I mention this? Well, I mean, if you watch American Horror Story, which isn't something that I watch, but my wife does occasionally, they claim that Eisenhower cut a deal with the aliens back in the 50s, and they gave them the technology to essentially have iPhones and that type of technology in return for whatever. I don't know. All I got to say is I don't believe that we're alone in this universe. It's way too big, but I don't know just how significant that may be. That's the best I can do.
Are they here, Chris Heaven?
Okay, so this is interesting. I got this book in the mail today from my very good friend, Jeff Nicholas. Some of you may know who Jeff Nicholas is. Jeff Nicholas served in the Army for 20 years and 1 week as a 160 Night Stalker, so a Black Hawk pilot. He was in Mogadishu. He flew that day. He's a true American hero. I've never seen anybody able to quote scripture like Jeff Nicholas can. And at the end of the day, I think that if you're a person of faith, you got to believe that there's other sentient living beings out there. And here's where I'm going with this with Jeff Nicholas. 3 times during his career, he encountered some sort of UFO. One of them was over DFW airport, and it almost hit him, and he swerved, and the main blades on his Blackhawk hit a tower. And thank God he put it down and survived to walk away from it. In all 3 instances, he was debriefed essentially at the highest levels from an intel perspective, and then was told shortly thereafter that he was one of many pilots who saw these UFOs all 3 times that he saw them. So there's something out there, and Jeff Nicholas is one of the most honest men I have ever met in my life. And if he says that's what he saw, and if he says that was what was told him by our intel as they interviewed him going back into the 80s and 90s, yeah, there's something to it.
Ken Nuss, are we being visited? You're on mute, my friend.
Is that better?
Yep.
There we go. I really haven't put much thought into it, other than I do agree with Chris. There's a higher power out there, and we'd be foolish to think that there's nothing out there. What it is, I don't know. I don't know.
MP, chime in. What's your view on this subject? I think it's a fascinating subject, you guys, and I think it's one that we should talk about more in this country, because a lot of stuff has come out recently. MP, weigh in.
First of all, I at one point in my life did believe that they did exist, but because the government admitted that they does exist, I no longer believe anything that has to do with them, because I don't trust anything. Like I said, I've been in the military. I worked for the government afterwards, and I can tell you that there's a lot. I just don't trust it. It was a great conspiracy, a great theory that they were out here, but once they start admitting that something's here, I just move on to the next thing. You know what I mean? They're going to create something and probably try to come after us with it and convince everybody that they're real, because they have the technology to do so now, especially with aircraft.
Deep fakes?
No, real aircraft that can what's the word I'm looking for?
Maneuver?
Nope. The way they can project LED on the aircraft now to match the background. This was something that they were testing back in the day, but now they can do that. It's basically a hologram, but it's a real aircraft, and it just looks like they're invisible. And because that's the proof that they're putting out there, and like I said before, I can call bullshit on some things when I see it because I've seen it with my own eyes. Now that they're coming out and trying to tell us this actually exists, I just tell them to go fuck themselves, and you know what I mean? I don't believe a word that they say.
Let me add this to what MP is saying. So the name is escaping me. No, it's not. I got it. Project Bluebeam. Look it up. So Project Bluebeam has been going on forever, and it's exactly what MP just said. So they project holographic images into the sky that, as far as all of us are concerned, it looks real, when in reality it's not. There have actually been reports of when the Iranians were lobbing stuff over towards Israel a couple months ago, that was all fake, and it was all Project Bluebeam, all a projection.
So Project Bluebeam started with that, but now they have sophisticated enough actual aircraft that they're basically a giant LED screen. The aircraft is a giant LED screen, and it records the background that it's in, and it projects the background on the actual aircraft. So it looks like an F-22 or a disc-shaped object, and the reason it disappears is because it blends into the background.
Yeah.
It's basically AV camo. And I can say factually that they were testing this. So anyway, to answer your question, I don't fucking believe anything the government says.
Well, I'm going to say
I agree with you on that too.
The USS Nimitz, and I think his name was David Thayer, the pilot, one of the pilots. I've heard interviews with two of the pilots from the Nimitz that were involved in those situations that were, the New York Times broke with the video of these Tic Tac vehicles, whatever you want to call them. I'll tell you what, that's pretty good evidence for me. I like those Navy pilots. They know what they're talking about. Anyway, Chris Heaven, where can everybody go? Give us the URL. Give us where we want to go see you over at Survival Dispatch. Where do we go?
survivaldispatch.com. If you want to see uncensored, unredacted content, go to clouthub.com and just do a search on Survival Dispatch. It'll take you to our channel there. There's also a lot of good information on the Vax Choice channel, by the way, where Todd Callender and I collaborate over there. And it's that easy to find us.
Awesome. You're going to love that channel. Survival Dispatch. Chris Heaven, thanks for being here. Just final thoughts real quick. Everybody, one last comment. Ken Nuss.
Close the border and let's fix the elections.
MP or me?
MP. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I'm kind of going to go off of what Ken said. Paper ballots, voter ID, same-day counting. Problem solved.
Amen.
Analog. Go back to analog.
Amen. MP.
Yeah, I want to retract my previous statement. And the only alien that I believe is with us is Ken.
At least you didn't call me an asshole.
Ken Nuss is a Superman. I'm telling you what.
You know what I'm saying?
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being on the Red Friday podcast. A great time as always. Chris, you got to come back, man. You got to come back.
Careful what you wish for.
I think we need a part two. I think we need a part two of this.
Without a doubt.
And we got a
lot of convo on the table there.
Sounds good.
If I come back, if I get an invite to come back, I will come back, and I will wear a red shirt because now I got the memo now.
It's all right, man. It's all right.
All right, guys.
All right, everybody out there,
www.ownarmedforcesbrewingco.com.
Head on over there. A lot going on in this.
Hey, what's the update on New Jersey?
We're working it. We're working it. We're working it.
I'm going to ask you every week.
Distributors right now. Those distributors need to wake up there.
Oh, by the way, if you're in the Virginia area, we have a big concert at our brewery right now, so come on out. I can hear them playing.
Yeah. Whoa is performing live on stage. They're like a 90s band. They're awesome. 90s party band. All right, everybody, have a great night.
All right.
Take us
See you guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Chris. Thanks, Ken. Thanks,
care, guys.
MP.
Later.